Are you fascinated by the paranormal and want to hear about encounters that have happened to real-life people in real-life places? Do you need a drink to calm those nerves after hearing some scary stories?
You're listening to Booze and Bourbon.
Well, we invite you to grab a drink, whether it's a coffee or something with a little bit more spirit in it. Grab a blanket, snuggle in, because I'm Kim and that's Jen, and we're Booze and Bourbon.
Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Booze and Bourbon. I'm Jen, and this is Kim.
Hello, Jen. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, we're here together in Southwest Nova Scotia, doing a little filming again.
Yeah, it's quite the time. My eyes are burning a little bit, but other than that, I'm great.
Yes. Some late nights. We had a super cool, crazy experience last night. And all I can say is that I've never seen anything like that before in my life. And
we had some new lights. They were cool.
Yeah.
Little flashes of light everywhere.
And some other red lights,
yes,
which I can't get into detail, but scared the shit out of me. So anyway, slept well last night though, so that's good.
Yeah, me
so
too.
It was always a positive after some ghost hunting. This week's off to a nice start weather-wise. Worked on some tanning on the weekend. And
we have our first heat warning.
Pretty much.
Basically, for the summer.
Yeah, so things have been good. We've got a really great episode coming your way today because we have been collecting bones. No, just kidding. We've been collecting listener stories. So we're going to share those with you guys today. And don't forget that if you want to share any of your stories with us, you can always do that. You just need to send us an email. And then when we have enough and we've gone through them all and have approved them, trust me, the approval process is pretty lenient, then we share them with you. So here we go today. Pretty exciting. This first one actually comes to us from one of our patrons. It's from East Tennessee.
Ooh.
Mr. Jamie.
All right. So this was on a Saturday evening, late around 11 p.m. Had I been by myself on the deck, I would have dismissed what I experienced because I had indulged in some sipping whiskey all day. However, my girlfriend was with me and heard what I heard. From out of nowhere, there was a loud growl, like it had come from just off the deck. I was like, WTF? What was that? Holly was terrified, so we thought it possibly could be an animal, such as a bear or even a coyote. But when I got up to look, nothing was to be found. So I used my Ovilus app and asked who or what was around us. I got a response that spelled out soul. I was like, holy shit, we both couldn't believe it. As time passed by, Holly went inside and I stayed out. While she was inside, I was sitting at our outdoor table and behind me I could feel an uneasy presence. It felt like something wanted to choke me. I jumped up and was shaking. Was it my alcohol intake? Possibly, but I feel certain that there was something outside. I was just curious if you all had any experiences that involved being outdoors, particularly on the patio or something like that. Keep up the good work. Cheers from East Tennessee. Jamie.
Wow. Okay. So a loud growl. Also, the Ovilus app would have freaked me out if it automatically said soul. I honestly have no idea what that was. Can pretty much guarantee that it wasn't your alcohol intake. I feel like spirits kind of open up the easy way, like the express highway for spirits to potentially come through to you. Spirits as in alcohol. I feel like cannabis does that as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a good chance there was something outside. It's crazy.
I would say.
As for what it is, I don't really know. I don't want to say the D word, but it almost sounds demonic.
A demon squirrel.
It was a demon squirrel. There you go. That's enlightening. Didn't know there could be such a thing. But yeah, Jamie, that's pretty crazy. And let's just hope that whatever that was is no longer around in East Tennessee. Drinking your whiskey. All right. So the next one is from Ginger. She says, hello, my name is Ginger, pronounced just like ginger ale. which I love splashed around in my bourbon on the rocks occasionally. Love it. She's from Cleveland, Ohio, and says, I've been listening to your podcast on Spotify for a few months now, which I love. That is so sweet. I've got a personal paranormal story for you, though, and it all started right before coronavirus blew up. It seemed to start when my fiance, Kaylor, and I visited Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum in Vegas on March 5th, and we had just viewed Lily the doll when our tour guide had to stop and leave the building because she couldn't breathe. This exact incident was highlighted in the first episode of the Ghost Adventures Quarantine Special, which I actually saw that, so I know exactly what she's talking about. In that near same moment, the tour guide had her experience. I had one as well. I was on the other side of the room, not fully aware of what was going on with the tour guide having her experience and leaving, when I felt kind of an electric shock that was temporarily numbing my left hand as it was just hanging at waist level. Stacia, who had just taken over as our tour guide, was holding a picture frame, hugging the photo side to her chest. Notices me reacting to the experience I just had and asks me what's wrong. I tell her, and she gives me this look and turns around the photo that she's holding, and it's of a man with an apparition nearing his hand in the exact spot I was standing. That is the only noteworthy experience I had in the museum that day, but I lost every penny I gambled after that for the rest of my visit. However, since arriving home and being home a lot because of coronavirus, Kaylor and I have noticed an uptick in activity at home. We've had some non-threatening experiences for a while, but we believe it was just his grandfather. And this feels more ominous. We also both, on separate occasions and alone, saw a shadow figure near our attic door. Oh my God, that's terrifying. Earlier tonight, we watched episode 2 of the quarantine special of Ghost Adventures. They filmed the special locked in the museum we went to just a couple of weeks after we were there. And then a few hours afterwards, sitting in our living room, just after 2 a.m., we start to feel a cool breeze hitting the back of our necks, blowing in the opposite direction than our living room window AC is blowing. I turned around and stuck my arm out into the area of the cold air, where it was coming from, and instantly got goosebumps on my arm. I pulled my arm back in shock, looking at Kaylor momentarily, then looking back at the spot I had my arm to see a quick, small apparition move from right to left. The cold air seemed to surround me. Kaylor noticed that the cold air disappeared from its original spot, so I had him feel the air around my head, and he could feel the temperature difference too. Being a little scared, I huddled up towards him, and the cold spot hung in the air where my head was before. Kaylor has had similar things happen to him most nights around that time. The other night I was in bed. Kaylor wasn't home from work yet, but I had just heard commotion in our living room, like more than one person talking. Kaylor also experienced this last night after I fell asleep. He also sometimes gets this feeling that something is right in his face when he closes his eyes in bed and vanishes when he opens them. Oh my gosh. But in one instance of opening his eyes, he sees a blacker than black mass with tentacles hovering over the other end of our bedroom. This freaked me out immensely, and I immediately burned sage around the whole house while imagining a white light around myself and Kaylor. So far, so good. We've had a calm few days since then. Any insights? The shadow person is one thing, but the black mass he saw reminded me of something from an episode of Dead Files, where Amy encounters an entity that feeds off of negativity. Scary stuff. Cheers, Ginger.
Oh.
What do you think about that?
I don't know, but I don't like having like ghost talks in my living room, like, you know, like a little powwow going on while I'm just in the other room. That's not very enjoyable.
And there was an experience when you and I were paranormal investigating, and it sounded like coming over like the spirit box or the ghost box. It sounded like two people were having an argument.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's really weird. It's
like you can still have arguments in the afterlife.
I guess so.
Disagreements with your ghost friends.
I guess so. That's crazy. I hope that has gone away. The more you sage and the more you surround yourself in white light, I feel like you can protect yourself. That's what I do anyway.
Sage it away.
Sage it away.
Okay, we'll continue along here. When I was about 14, I'm 30 now, I had just laid down for bed and was facing the wall when I heard one of my closet doors open. There were two in my room, and my parents used one of them for storage as we were still living in a townhouse apartment at the time. I turned around and saw the storage closet open, and who I thought was my dad standing in front of the closet. Figured he was just grabbing something. I ask him what he's doing twice with no answer. Then he looks towards me, but it's not him. It's just a dark human-like figure with glowing eyes. After it looks at me for a moment, it turns back towards the closet and walks inside it, disappearing. I told my friend this a couple years ago. She's extremely sensitive to these kinds of things, and she got worried about me having an attachment until I explained that there was an electrical power facility that I could not see out of my bedroom window. So maybe it was just a refuel station area for the paranormal. In that same bedroom, I also witnessed my room suddenly light up bright as day around midnight and then go dark again, just as quick, with a little light zigzagging out of view. One more experience that sticks out to me is sleep paralysis. I've experienced it a few times, and the first time I did, I saw a blacker than black, slimy, pulsating, rotating big knot of like worms or tentacles hovering over me. It terrified me, and I couldn't move or scream, as one can't while experiencing sleep paralysis. After I did my research, I chalked it up to a hallucination. After a few years later, when a former acquaintance described seeing the exact same thing while he had a bout of sleep paralysis, I never told him about my experience before. I just found it really strange and coincidental that we both saw the same entity. Also, from Ginger.
Okay. Well, I don't know about this blacker than black, slimy, pulsating thing. It doesn't sound cute at all.
No.
But one thing that kind of like I've heard before is when your friend was worried about you having an attachment and you had explained that there was an electrical power facility. I used to live really close to a bunch of power lines, and it seemed like everybody that lived like within that proximity of the power lines, like the 4 homes that were kind of next to me, when somebody had passed away shortly thereafter, all of us were having things happen to us around our house. And I always chalked it up to the fact that there was like a lot of energy around and that it was kind of like a refueling station. So I think that that could be very accurate. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Just crazy. All right. So the next one. To give you a bit of background on Galveston Island in Texas, it is located about an hour outside of Houston, give or take. The island has quite a bit of history, with being a massive point of entry for immigrants in the late 1800s to early 1900s. Sounds like Halifax. And being a Civil War historical site. The deadliest natural disaster in United States history also occurred here, the Great Storm of 1900. Nevertheless, it's safe to say a crap ton of people have died, and the houses that survived are ancient. The entire island is haunted, and anyone who has lived there can tell you that. Now for my story. I lived in one of the houses that survived the storm of 1900. It was a cute house, nice yard, wooden carved statue in the front of the house, as some historic houses have here. I moved in with my family, and shortly after I moved in, I would begin hearing whistling around the house. Not like wind moving through the windows or whatever you'd explain whistling away to, but a tune. I first heard it in the shower and brought it up to my aunt. My aunt is a hippie type of person in her 40s, recently divorced, sage the house when she feels bad vibes type of person. I brought up the whistling to my aunt, and she said that she believed the spirit of the man who built the house was haunting the house, but that he was harmless. My aunt also informed me that the man's spirit preferred women for whatever reason, and that the man's spirit was more aggressive towards men. One night, sitting on the front porch with my aunt, we both heard a very loud pound on the house behind our heads. And it was one of the first times I really knew something was there. I'd like to say that I've always had an open mind, always been interested in the paranormal, and it entertained me. I've had a few small encounters in life, but nothing like this, nothing that I couldn't easily explain away. To continue with the real spooky part of my story, it happened one night I was alone in my room. My cousin's room was down the hall from mine. She had her boyfriend over that night. I was sitting on my phone with the TV off, so I knew there was no other explanation for the whistling when it started. It started somewhat quietly, a definite old-sounding tune. It got louder to the point where it sounded like it was right next to me, and that's when I freaked and ran to my cousin's room. I opened the door and asked my cousin and her boyfriend if they had been whistling, and at the time, I even remembered the tune. So I repeated the tune for them, and they said they hadn't been whistling and that their TV was muted when I came into the room. The second that they stopped talking and said no, the whistle repeated itself right next to me in the hallway. The whistle was loud and clear, and all three of us stared at each other. My cousin and her boyfriend insisted on checking the house to see if someone had gotten in. And when we checked the house, there was no one there, with all the doors and windows still closed and locked. My aunt wasn't home at the time. Feeling freaked out, I went back to my room and tried to distract myself, but now had anxiety. I called for a friend for distraction, and after a few minutes talking, my friend laughed and asked me who was in the room with me. I told him no one, and in a serious tone. And when he realized I really meant that no one was in the room with me, he refused to tell me what he had heard. All that he said was that the voice directed itself at him. To this day, I don't know what the voice he heard said. After the phone incident, I was so freaked out, I slept on the floor of my cousin's room. I had extreme anxiety and felt like I was being watched the entire night. I'm now currently moved out of the house, thankfully, and have definitely spared a lot of other details. Terry Lynn. Yeeks!
Icky.
I don't like the whistle. The whistle part is probably the scariest part. Especially if it was like a tune you can remember and it would just keep playing in your head over and over and over again. Ugh. Yuck.
Well, I mean, whistling can be good when it's, a little attractive young man on the side of the road, but when it's coming from an unknown place,
yeah,
very unsettling.
Are you saying that when it's a cat call, it's okay?
Yeah, sometimes.
And if it's a cat call coming from a ghost, is it okay?
It could be if he was cute. I would need to see what he looked like first, I guess.
True. So true.
All right. So I had shared a listener story from one of my friends, I think the last time we did one of these. And she had shared a story about her daughter seeing an older lady in a white dress in her room. Do you remember? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So now from another friend who actually lived in that home as well for a very brief period. I think she was only there for about 3 months in between moving. Mm-hmm. So she had a room in the basement, and the other friend and her daughter and husband were upstairs. So she had a story that she shared. I think it was actually after I had the other story already told to me. Mm-hmm. So she was home one night, and it was a summer evening. So it was very daylight out at this point because it was only around 6 p.m. She knew she was home by herself because they had already told her that they were going to be out for the evening, basically, until later, like around 10 o'clock. So she was just, hanging out, doing some things in the basement. But she heard almost like she said it wasn't the front door shutting. It was just a sound of like something shutting. And then she could hear distinct footsteps coming across the upstairs floor from where the door would be into the kitchen. So she yelled, "Hey, I didn't expect you guys back," and didn't hear anything. And then she waited a second, and then she could hear the footsteps move through the kitchen. So then she kind of got a little worried that somebody might be in the house that maybe wasn't them at all and was like somebody just walking in the house. So she ran up the stairs, looked to her right, which would be into the living room, and down towards their bedrooms, and didn't see anything. But the candle that she had lit on the dining room table or living room table was out, like as if somebody just blew it out. So she could see the smoke coming off of it. So then she looked to her left, which would go into the kitchen. And that candle that was on the kitchen table was also doing the same thing, as if something walked by both candles very quickly.
Nope.
So then she instantly got that gross feeling, like hair standing up on the back of her neck, and her heart rate was very elevated at that point. And she did a full lap of the house and was trying to figure out like what it could be. Like they do have a cat, but she's like the cat would have to jump up in the air and flail around to put the candles out, basically, and then thud like an adult person on the floor to make it sound like that. So anyway, she went through the whole house, found nothing, and then got very panicked and waited in her room downstairs until they came home like hours later, and then had told them about what happened. And then that's when she told her about the story with her daughter.
Wow.
So then they both connected that there was definitely something there, but very unsure of what that may be. I guess it could be the old lady that the daughter saw. I'm not really sure. So
Well,
yeah.
It sounds like whatever it was in a
Sorry.
It sounds like whatever it was in a rush to get out of there. Like AKA blowing out the candles as it walked by. It must have been like pretty brisk.
A brisk walk through the home, yes.
Brisk stroll, yeah.
So now I have another story that's it's enjoyable to me only because this lady, perhaps because of what I was like as a child and a teenager, she might have thought it was me at my cottage, which is also down here in the lovely South Shore area of Nova Scotia. On the dirt road that we have our cottage on, there's a lot of people who have a lot of animals because we're in the country. So you have your dogs outside, they're never tied up. Your cats are outside. You might have goats, chickens, horses, that kind of thing.
Life goals right there, Jen.
I know. And I love horses. So to give you a little background, perhaps as a teenager, I was a bit of a dick. And because my dad wouldn't get me a horse, I chose to go up the street and sometimes, occasionally, maybe a few times, jumped over the fence and tried to get on my neighbor's horse. It may have worked once. Didn't work the second time.
You need to tell the listeners a little bit more about this. You need to tell them that you went bareback.
I did, yes. I took some sugar cubes and a carrot and coaxed the horse over to the fence. And then I climbed on its back and tried to ride it around until the gentleman that owns the horse came up and was very angry because, that could be very dangerous for a teenager.
No.
And made sure to tell my dad, which probably ensured that I would never get a horse again after that point. But anyway, so that was what I was known for. So fast forward to, this would have only been, I was very much an adult at this point. The lady that lives down the street from us, she's always boarded horses. So she always has at least 5 or 6 there at one time. She has her home, obviously, kind of facing the lake. And then if you came out the front door and looked to your left, there's a very large field. And then she has a barn that's fairly, I'd probably say, I don't know, like a good 200 feet from her home. Mm-hmm. So one night after dusk, she heard the horses kind of like making a lot of racket, kind of like they were getting fired up out there for no apparent reason. So in her mind, she thought, okay, it could just be the cat or the dog or something's in the barn with them. So she let it go, but then it kept getting worse. So then she looked out, and what she could see was a female standing in there, and she could just see the back of them. So she could tell that they had like long hair, but they were kind of like foggy almost. Like she said she wasn't sure if it was like the mist that she was seeing or that at that time she thought it was just like the way that maybe the mist was going through the barn, like it was making them look foggy. Mm-hmm. So in her mind, she probably thought it was me. That's what I think she thought. Maybe. Or somebody like me that was doing the same thing. So she ran out and yelled as she was running to get out of the stables, like, leave the horses alone. Can you please get out? Mm-hmm. As she got closer, she realized that this thing wasn't as solid as she thought. Like, it wasn't a solid mass. It wasn't a person. It was like a apparition, if you will.
Oh my God.
So the horses at that point were starting to calm down because probably they saw her coming. But as she got closer, she realized like this thing wasn't moving and it wasn't a human. And as she got about 20 feet away from the barn, it just disappeared.
Wow.
So I don't know what that would be. It wasn't me. I'm just going to put that out there to all of our listeners and as well as to her.
Maybe it was your spirit doppelganger.
Yeah. But when she shared the story, it was kind of funny because my parents were like, well, like, you wouldn't put it past her. But I mean, now that she's an adult, we would hope that she wouldn't be doing that anymore. And I'm like,
exactly.
No, guys, I swear that was not me. And also, she did say that the apparition was much shorter. I am short, but this was like more childlike. So,
wow.
Stirring up the horses.
So crazy. Yeah. All right, guys, that pretty much wraps up today's storytelling. Thank you so much to everybody who sent us your stories. And we get so excited when we see these hit our mailbox. So if you have a listener story, please feel free to email our Gmail account, which is booze and bourbon, BOOSAND, bourbon at gmail.com. Also, if you want to become a patron and get some inside scoop and some free swag, head on over to patreon.com/booze and bourbon. Don't forget, we also have a great Redbubble store. Just go to redbubble.com and find Booze and Bourbon, and you will find whiskey-ware and paranormal stuff and cryptozoology stuff and just like a whole bunch of really fun things, and even Atlantic Canadian stuff like Donairs. I just actually had somebody send me a message and say that they got Donair leggings and a Donair blanket. And I was like, you are my hero.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I also got my stuff just recently, and I would like to say that the quality is very, very nice. Like I got some Booze and Bourbon socks, Whiskey Makes Me Frisky shirt, a pillow, a Ouija board pillow. All very nice.
Yes. So amazing. And I have a hoodie and tank top and a mask, and I got a bunch of things too. So I love it. Absolutely love it. So guys, also, if you want to find us on social media, you can find us on Instagram and on Facebook. Just type in Booze and Bourbon and you will find us. And Jen, if people want to listen more or subscribe or stalk us in the podcast world, how can they do that?
I mean, you could stalk us really anywhere in the podcast world. Any lovely app that allows us to be heard, we're on there. Also, Instagram, Insta-famous, we are on there, Booze and Bourbon. Facebook, Booze and Bourbon, the podcast, we're on there as well. I want to say Starlight, but that's not the word I'm trying to say. Moonlight, occasionally on YouTube and Twitter, occasionally as well.
Yeah, very occasionally on Twitter. It's a whole other Twilight Zone that we don't really belong to yet.
Yes.
Yes, we very much appreciate any love and support you guys can send our way. Also, we're toying with some ideas for some upcoming episodes, wondering what you guys have to share with us. Thinking something along the lines of psychic mediums and how they can connect with people who have passed over, as well as the topic, I mentioned it like 2 minutes ago, doppelgangers.
Yes.
Terrifying. So if anybody has any stories regarding those two topics, make sure that you send them to our email or just like say, hey, on Instagram, I have a story for you, and we'll figure it out from there. As always, guys, thank you so much for listening, and you'll hear an all new episode of Booze and Bourbon next Friday.
Thanks, guys.
Stay spooky.
Booze and Bourbon is part of the ABV network. For more information or to advertise on the show, please head over to abvnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and cheers.
This has been a Steve Akeley production.